This one, there's some new stuff. And that's very interesting. Now, if you want to watch it because you want answers that will help you decide what's going to happen in the NCAA investigation, yeah, you're not getting that. There's a reason the notice of allegations came out 2 days before the doc came out, because there's nothing in the doc that's going to be a smoking gun that the NCAA could use against Michigan. There's nothing in the doc that's going to exonerate Michigan. There's nothing that's going to exonerate Connor Stalions. But what it is a deep dive into the central figure in one of the most interesting / absurd college football stories we have ever seen. So I guess that's where we start. Is Connor Stalions the person? We talked about him. We wrote about him. We read all these stories. We didn't hear from him for all of those months. Now he gets his chance to tell his side of the story. And so you have to come at it from that perspective. You have to understand that that is perspective that this is coming from. This is Connor Stalions' version of the events. Now, there are other folks in there. There's an Ohio State blogger called Brohio, or a message board poster, who's in like black clothes, sunglasses, ski mask. Like it's a little weird, but like he's in there to provide the counterbalance. And then you've got your Dan Wetzels from Yahoo and Nicole Auerbach kind of explaining and narrating what's going on. But I was there for the Connor Stalions comments. Like, I want to hear from that guy. I want to know what makes him tick. I want to know how he became what he became. What was the sequence of events? How did all this work? That part I was very interested in. That part I was fascinated by. Because Connor Stalions, according to himself, his parents, and this is them putting the most positive spin on it they can. Like, Connor Stalions basically devoted his entire life to becoming a Michigan football coach. Like, he talks about how in the history of coaching, the best coaches all served in the military, and that's what inspired him to go to the Naval Academy. Like, that is interesting because there are a lot of reasons you would go to a service academy. A lot. To become a coach, and specifically to become a Michigan coach, is not one of them for most people, or any people probably. So let's go. Here are the reasons you go to a service academy. One, you've wanted to serve in the military your entire life. You feel like you want to help defend the country, and you want to be a leader in the military. That's an obvious one. Two, they're very academically prestigious. They're tough to get into. They provide a great education, and that education is free. That's another major reason. Three, graduates tend to move on when they finish their military service to very good jobs. They provide great training for whatever profession you want to go into. That's another big reason. Now, you could say that that's the reason Connor Stalions chose, but I mean, everything was directed toward becoming a football coach at Michigan. So he goes to the Naval Academy, serves in the Marines, with the idea that it will make him a better football coach at Michigan eventually. And maybe it did. Maybe it did. But that's how single-minded this guy was. That's how laser-focused this guy was on becoming a football coach at Michigan. Like, there's video of him dressed as Bo Schembechler for Halloween at 7 years old, and it's adorable. And then you realize, oh, he's been thinking about this for this long. And he talks about going to the Naval Academy, walking into Ken Niumatalolo's office saying, I'm a student here. I'd like to help out. And within, short period of time, he's on the sidelines trying to decode Ohio State signals. And of course, it was Ohio State. First game that Navy played when Connor Stalions was a student. But this, of course, because it's told really from Connor Stalions' perspective, makes it seem like he is like Benedict Cumberbatch in The Imitation Game. Like, he's the one. He's cracking all these codes. He's the secret sauce. Whether that's true or not is another topic for debate. there's a lot of Ohio State fans who think he's the reason that Michigan got good in 2021. That is, by the way, when he was hired as a staff member and not just as a volunteer. But that's also when they basically revamped their entire staff. They fired Don Brown. They brought in Mike McDonald. They moved Sharon Moore to offensive line coach. Like, there were some other things going on then. It was a pretty big overhaul. But how you feel about that probably depends on how badly you want Michigan to be in the wrong here. So it was very interesting. Now, very disappointed he did not explain the vacuum cleaner thing. If you remember correctly, he had the vacuum cleaner repair business and vacuum cleaners just all over the porches of his house, the porch of his house. Never explained that. Highly disappointed that was never explained in the documentary. He did explain the manifesto, though. That was really interesting because, remember, our friend Richard Johnson was writing in Sports Illustrated last fall, talked to somebody who was an acquaintance of Connor Stalions and found out there's this massive manifesto. I believe in Richard's story, the estimate was 600 pages. It's actually thousands of pages, according to Connor Stalions. It is multiple thousands of pages. And it's basically everything he's ever learned about coaching, quotes, philosophies. It's spreadsheets. He mapped where every player who got drafted in the NFL since 2010 is from. He coded it. He came up with a scoring system. Now, as the person who mapped where all the colleges sourced their players for SI, back when Connor Stalions was in middle school, I felt particularly seen by that part of it. But I mean, this is the sort of thing he was just obsessed. He also went into how he figured out the signs, how he created the visual aids that allowed coaches and players to decipher what was going on. I thought that was really interesting. He explains how he stood against a white background, he took his phone and basically took pictures of himself doing all these different signs that he'd seen on the sidelines. And then how he made essentially a cheat sheet that says, when they do this, it means this. And it was really interesting. And it also speaks to his ability to, one, decipher the information, two, to explain it to other people so that they can then use it quickly. So these are all skills that are very helpful, like could be helpful in any industry. But he used it in this way. Now, you're probably saying, okay, but get to the part with the NCAA investigation. Get to the part where you find out what's going to happen to Michigan. You never really get to that part. But what you do see is that Connor Stalions did interview with the NCAA in April, and they show you a good chunk of that interview. And I thought that was really interesting. Couple parts of the interview. He admits that he bought tickets for other people to go to games that didn't involve Michigan. And again, this is the part that matters, because that's what's against the rules. Like, you can look across the sideline at your own game at your opponent and decipher their signals, and that's not against the rules. If you have TV copy of the game and it shows the coach's signaling and you can put things together, that's not against the rules. The rule is against sending people to games that aren't yours, having them independently record it. That's against the rule. It was a cost-cutting move put in by the NCAA in the mid-90s. They actually considered repealing it a few years ago. And that's where it got interesting, because my wife was actually getting ready for work while watching this documentary with me. And that was what her question was about. Like, that was her biggest question, is like, okay, who cares? Like, why is this even against the rules? And I tried to explain the whole cost-cutting thing, why it's against the rules. And she's like, why are they acting like this is a criminal offense? Like, who cares? And I think that's probably how most people who aren't knee-deep in college football, when they watch this thing, are going to feel. Remember, these are aimed at very broad audiences. So a lot of the people who are watching this are not aware of the vagaries of NCAA rules. So I thought that was interesting. I thought her response to that was interesting because she's sort of the target audience for this documentary, not me. And so I do wonder how many people are going to watch it who don't really follow college football that closely, who are going to go, who cares? Why do we care? So he says that he bought tickets for people to go to other games. He also says that some people sent him video from those games, which is very interesting because that's kind of the problem. Now, what he's accused of is having this network. The accusation that would get Michigan in big trouble is if Jim Harbaugh, Sharon Moore, any of the other people were involved in it, were directing it. I can tell you right now that Connor Stalions did not say that anybody did that. We know that. My guess is that the NCAA did not find that anybody did that either. We'll find out what's in that notice of allegations, but we've seen the draft copy through ESPN's reporting. And based on some of the conversations I've had since the NOA hit Michigan on Sunday, I don't think they established that link. I don't think the NCAA investigators established that link. So essentially, this is Connor Stalions saying he was the lone wolf here, but now he's saying he wasn't having people go to games and record them, but he is admitting that people went to games with tickets he bought and sent him film. So if you're the NCAA, that's probably enough for you. Because remember, it's not a court of law. The standard is not beyond a reasonable doubt. And when Connor Stalions, when you hear him say to the NCAA investigator, to my understanding, there are some people who attended games using tickets I purchased and recorded parts of games. Sometimes I would receive film from them. Then they cut to him in an interview separately saying, it's like when your aunt gets you a Christmas present you already have. He's like, I already knew this stuff. I didn't need this stuff. But that's probably going to be enough for the NCAA with Connor Stalions himself. And then the other just totally hilarious part is the NCAA investigator asks him, was that him on the Central Michigan sideline in the Michigan State game? And he goes, I don't recall attending a specific game. Translation, yes, that was me. And earlier in the doc, you have Dave Portnoy, the founder of Barstool Sports, who is a Michigan grad, saying, Connor Stalions told me it was him. Like, that's in the documentary. And then immediately it cuts to Connor Stalions holding a picture of the guy on the Central Michigan sideline and just kind of smiling. And then cuts to another part of his interview, not with the NCAA, but just separately, where he says, I don't even think that looks like me. It's just hysterical. Again, a lot of this is just so absurd. But what I took away and what I thought was really interesting is he did spend so much of his life trying to get there. And he got there. He became a Michigan staffer. And then he did something that caused him to have to quit his job at Michigan. The NCAA is going to hit him for being uncooperative. That's how this all works. Based on what answers they showed us, and that's Connor Stalions and his attorney allowed that video to be shown. Based on what they showed us, and based on how previous NCAA cases have gone, they're going to hit him with being uncooperative. They're going to issue a punishment that will make it very hard for him to be hired in college football. And the difference is, like, we've seen college coaches get fairly severe NCAA punishments and come back from them. Bruce Pearl, probably the best example of that, was the Tennessee basketball coach, got punished for lying to the NCAA about Aaron Kraft being at a cookout, not a barbecue, but a cookout. But then he comes back as the Auburn coach. Now, the difference was Bruce Pearl had a very decorated history of being a head coach before that happened. And he was proven as a winner of games as a head coach. So somebody was going to hire him again. Connor Stalions was a low-level staffer. It's unclear how helpful he actually was. Not sure anybody's going to take a chance on him whenever whatever NCAA penalty gets handed down is over. So chances are he's never going to be able to go back to Michigan. He's the defensive coordinator at Mumford High in Michigan right now. The alma mater of fictional graduate Axel Foley, but he's working in football now. And maybe he becomes a great high school coach. Maybe eventually he gets a chance to go back to college. But he's probably never going to be able to go back to Michigan. And that's the craziest part of all this. John in the chat says, Andy, are you going to talk about when Dan Wetzel said he has proof at least 5 other teams did the same thing Stalions said? Dan didn't say that. Dan said other teams did it. If Dan has proof of it, Dan will publish it. Dan would have already published it because that's how Dan operates. So I don't think you quite understood what Dan said there. And that was the other thing. The rumor was that Connor Stalions was going to name some names of people who did this at other schools. He didn't. He said there are people who share information, but it was very vague. And if I were Connor Stalions' attorney, I would advise him not to name any names because that would expose me to a lawsuit. So that's where he could have probably put something juicier into the doc and didn't. If you've got proof of it, present the proof. You've had 9 months? No, you've had 11 months? 10 months? If you got proof of that, go ahead and present it. What they did do is accuse someone of hacking into Connor Stalions' email. And so they're saying an investigative firm that was hired by somebody, they're accusing Ohio State of being the ones who hired that investigative firm. They're saying they used an illegal means to get information from Connor Stalions. We'll find out about that. We'll see if that ever comes to fruition. But yeah, if you've been saying for 10 months you have proof and you're going to name names and you haven't actually done it, you're not going to do it. So that's where that is. But I came away somewhat sad because this is a 28-year-old guy who spent his whole life trying to get to this one place. And now he's never going to be able to get back there. So can he channel that obsession? Because let's be real, this was an obsession. Can he channel that obsession in a different direction that allows it to be positive? John in the chat, Andy, why did you use a goofy voice when you read my comment? Because it was a goofy comment, John. You really want there to be names of other people, but you're not using common sense here. If someone was going to name names, they already would have. So that'll probably be all we hear from Connor Stalions for a while. But it's really interesting. So if you want answers for the NCAA case, you're probably not going to get them. If you want to try to understand this person who's interesting, who we've been reading about for all these months, then perhaps you will be interested. Because I was fascinated by this guy. I find him endlessly interesting. And like I said, he's 28 years old. I hope he can channel that obsession into something else that allows him to live a fulfilling life without getting back to Michigan football, because I don't know that that's ever going to happen. Now, he's a cult hero among Michigan football fans, so that might be enough. But there's a lot of life left to go. A lot of life left to go. Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.